In the heart of Cape Town, where mountains met the ocean and the wind carried the scent of salt and ambition, Leonard had built his empire. He wasn't the kind of man who sought the glare of social media or the empty praise of awards. Leonard's world was measured in square footage and steel beams, in the quiet triumph of blueprints turned into towers. His name was respected in boardrooms and whispered at networking events. Yet, in the warm glow of his mansion, he found little comfort. Leonard's home was a modern marvel, a sleek structure of glass and marble perched on the hills of Constantia, overlooking vineyards that stretched like green carpets to the sea. The house had been a promise to his wife, Caroline, a woman of elegance and sharp beauty. They had met in a quiet art gallery in Greenpoint, where she had laughed at his earnest interest in landscapes. Her laughter had been the beginning, but years later, that laughter had turned cold. Caroline loved the house for its size and the view from her dressing room, not for the warmth of family or the promise of shared dreams. She moved through the hallways like a guest, untouched by the love Leonard still carried in his chest. She filled the rooms with her presence, but not her heart. He had seen it for years, but chose to look away. There was always another deal to close, another plot of land to develop. He buried his doubts in work and pretended that silence was peace. Leonard's business partner, Patrick, was the other half of the empire. Patrick was the face, charismatic and full of energy, always with a drink in hand and a new project on his lips. He was the one people remembered at parties, the one who could charm a room with a smile. Leonard was the steady hand, the quiet thinker who turned Patrick's bright ideas into tangible reality. Together they had built a company that changed skylines. Together they had shared triumphs and setbacks. Leonard had trusted him like a brother. The cracks began in whispers, small delays in payments, numbers on documents that didn't align. Patrick brushed them aside with casual explanations and confident laughter. Leonard, always the thinker, started to watch more closely. He noticed the long hours Patrick spent at the office after everyone else had gone home. The new car that didn't match his salary. The phone calls that ended when Leonard walked in. But he said nothing, choosing instead to believe in the bond they had forged over years of risk and reward. Then came Ella. She arrived in the house quietly, a housemaid hired through an agency that promised discretion and dedication. She was young but carried an old soul, her presence soft yet unwavering. Ella moved through the rooms with a gentle efficiency, never raising her voice, never asking for more than she needed. Her dark eyes missed nothing. She swept floors and folded sheets, but she also saw the things no one else noticed, the tension in Caroline's shoulders, the tightness in Leonard's jaw. Caroline dismissed her as another helper to be ordered around. Leonard saw something different. He saw someone who moved through the world with calm certainty. Ella never intruded, but she never looked away from what was real. Her quiet strength became the still point in a house that had grown hollow with secrets. The morning everything changed. The sky over Cape Town was a soft gray, the kind of day that promised rain, but delivered only wind. Leonard was dressed in a crisp navy suit, his briefcase already waiting by the door. He had an important meeting, one that would seal a massive deal in Johannesburg. Everything was riding on it. Patrick had called twice that morning, his voice bright and urgent. The contracts were ready. The investors were waiting. It was time. Leonard stepped into the grand hallway, the polished tiles cold under his shoes. His thoughts were already at the meeting, numbers, signatures, the final handshake. But as he reached for his car keys on the console, he noticed Ella standing near the doorway, her posture rigid. She wasn't cleaning or arranging flowers. She was simply there, her hands clasped together, her eyes wide with something he couldn't name. Leonard paused. Ella stood still, her breath shallow. She didn't move to open the door for him as she usually did. She didn't step aside. He noticed how her fingers trembled slightly, how her shoulders were set, as if she were bracing against something he couldn't see. In that stillness, he felt a strange certainty settle in his chest, a weight that pressed down on his lungs. He stood there for a moment longer, the house quiet around them. Then he turned back, setting his keys down on the console. He didn't leave. He didn't say a word. He simply walked into the living room and sat down, his eyes fixed on the floor. The hours that followed were slow and heavy. Caroline appeared in the doorway, her expression tight with confusion and irritation. She didn't understand why he wasn't at the meeting, why he sat there in silence while the world moved on outside. She didn't ask. She only watched him with narrowed eyes before retreating to her dressing room, her phone already in hand. Leonard didn't know why he had stayed behind. He only knew that he couldn't ignore the quiet warning in Ella's eyes. He didn't know what it meant, but he trusted it more than he trusted the polished smiles of boardrooms and the easy laughter of his business partner. Later that afternoon, the news came in a short, sharp call. His driver, Marcus, had been in a crash on the road to the airport. The car Leonard was meant to be in had been crushed under a truck that lost control on the wet streets. Marcus was alive, but barely. The car was gone. The meeting was never meant to happen. Leonard sat in the quiet of the house, the truth settling in his bones like winter. He realized how close he had come to never coming home. He thought of the rain on the road and the weight of steel and glass. And he knew without doubt that he owed his life to the quiet girl who had stood in his path. Caroline didn't share his sense of relief. She dismissed the accident as chance, an unfortunate event in a city where traffic was a daily gamble. But Leonard saw something else in her cold indifference, a flicker of annoyance, a flash of something dark and unspoken. Days passed, and Leonard began to watch more closely. He watched the way Caroline avoided Ella's steady gaze. He noticed how Patrick's calls grew more insistent, how the documents he sent were filled with inconsistencies that couldn't be explained by oversight or error. Leonard didn't confront them immediately. He waited. He listened to the silence. One evening, as he sat alone in his study, he found an old email thread that Patrick had carelessly left unguarded. It was a web of transactions, offshore accounts, and falsified invoices. Patrick had been siphoning funds from their company for over a year, hidden under layers of false names and fake projects. Leonard read every line, his heart pounding, each word a betrayal that cut deeper than the last. In that moment, he understood. The accident wasn't just bad luck. It had been arranged. Patrick had seen Leonard as an obstacle, a man too careful to sign the documents that would bury the truth. And Caroline, her cold smiles, her dismissive glances. She had known all along. Leonard's marriage had been a stage, and he had been the willing actor in a play he didn't know he was part of. He didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, he turned inward, gathering the threads of his life that had frayed under the weight of their lies. He called in quiet favors, hired an investigator he trusted, and began to document everything. Each night, he sat alone, the weight of betrayal settling over him like a dark cloak. But in the quiet hours, he also felt something else stirring a resolve he hadn't known he still possessed. Ella remained a steady presence. She never spoke of what she saw, but Leonard felt her calmness in every room she entered. She moved through the house with grace, her hands folded in small acts of care. Setting a glass of water on his desk, opening the curtains to let in the sun. She was the only one who never flinched, who never looked away from the truth in his eyes. When the confrontation finally came, it was quiet and precise. Leonard sat across from Patrick in a conference room, the city spread out beneath them in 1,000 points of light. Patrick still wore his easy smile, but there was a tightness around his eyes that betrayed him. Leonard laid out the evidence in neat rows of numbers and dates, each one a nail in the coffin of their friendship. Patrick said nothing. There were no excuses left, no bright laughter to cover the emptiness of his betrayal. Leonard didn't shout, he didn't curse. He only stood and walked away, leaving Patrick in the silence he had built for himself. At home, Caroline packed her things with the same cold precision she had always shown. There was no apology in her eyes, only relief. She left with her designer handbags and her secrets, the house echoing with the finality of her departure. Leonard watched her go, his heart heavy but unbroken. He realized that the home he had built was nothing more than walls and windows, without the warmth of honesty. The love he had given so freely had been spent on shadows. But he didn't grieve for long. There was work to do, and a life to reclaim. In the days that followed, Leonard poured his energy into rebuilding. He cleared out the boardroom of anyone who had ever turned a blind eye. He hired young minds who weren't afraid to challenge him, who brought fresh ideas and a hunger for integrity. He traveled to new cities, signed deals that honored the craft of building, not just the profit. He found joy again in the simple act of creation. Ella stayed for a while, her quiet presence a reminder that trust could still exist in a world that had tried to teach him otherwise. She moved through the house with the same calm purpose, her eyes kind but watchful. When she finally said goodbye, it was with the same quiet certainty she had always shown. She wasn't meant to stay. She was meant to be the light in the darkness, the quiet truth that refused to be ignored. Leonard watched her walk away, the morning sun catching in her dark hair. He didn't try to stop her. He only wished her peace. In the quiet that followed, he felt something shift inside him, a space opening where the bitterness had once lived. He knew he would never forget the way she had looked at him that morning in the hallway, how she had stood her ground with nothing but the truth in her eyes. He found love again in his own time, not with someone who needed his wealth or his name, but with a woman who shared his love for the city's skyline at sunset, who didn't flinch at the weight of his past. Together, they built a life that was simple but honest, a life where laughter came easily and trust was earned every day. In the quiet hours of the evening, Leonard sometimes walked to the window and watched the lights of the city below. He thought of the house he had built and the people who had filled it with lies. He thought of the girl who had saved him without ever raising her voice. And he thought of the man he had become, stronger, wiser, no longer blind to the truths that had always been there. In the end, he realized that betrayal had not broken him. It had shown him the value of his own heart, the power of listening to the quiet voice within. It had taught him that even in a world of concrete and steel, the human spirit was the most enduring foundation of all. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story.